Hello, everybody, and welcome to another weekly live here on the FreudenFreude channel, where we bring you content to help you grow and develop as a person and as a leader.
Hi, I'm Sandra.
I'm Claudia, and we
are coaches. Yay! So I'm a coach for neurodiverse professionals, expatriates, and executives.
And I love to enable corporate leaders, entrepreneurs, as well as their teams in tech and beyond. So very, very excited today. It's episode 1 on a new series we will be featuring this year. And the topic is intercultural intelligence. There you go.
Yes. You cut me off guard. I was like, what? Yes, intercultural intelligence, people. And this is one of the best topics. We hope that for a lot of the new people that are hearing it for the very first time or have been hearing about it and are curious, hope that this becomes, thank you, honey, your go-to for information, right, Claudia?
Yeah. And, I'm very, very excited about it because Sandra and I actually met through the intercultural intelligence community. And so it's definitely a topic near and dear to our hearts. And so we wanted to share some of that with you. So maybe let's start off with let me give it a definition, and then maybe you can chime in on what you think of my definition. Okay.
Sure.
I would say that intercultural intelligence is the ability to interact effectively with people from different cultures. Right? And so there's parts to that, and we're going to get into much more detail later. But is you are you from your cultural background. There are other people from all other culture groups, and they will behave differently. They might have different assumptions and beliefs and values, and just the way things are being done around here, right? And so cultural intelligence or intercultural intelligence is a way to be aware of, understand, and adapt your behavior correspondingly, so that you will be able to have productive, relationships with those people, whether it is in your social sphere or in the workplace.
And so for me, I guess I haven't put it in words, let's say in a sentence, but based on what we were talking yesterday, for me, it's about learning how to manage your assumptions, your perspectives, expand your perspectives, minimize your expectations, and liberate from judgment. I know it's hard to not judge, but one of the things that we have learned, and if you agree with me, Claudia, is that in coaching, we've learned that you listen to the person wholeheartedly. You just sit there and listen, and that helps you liberate yourself from judgment. What you do afterwards, believe it or not, for the people that are out there, it actually does help you to not think about it afterwards. Because when you talk with somebody, you usually, what I used to do before learning how to do the coaching program was to think about the conversation and start judging, right? And I was like, how could she have told me this? Oh my God, this person is so wrong, blah, blah, blah. But when you enter a conversation without having any thought about anything, just, okay, I'm going to sit down and listen. You don't think about it afterwards. You just let it go. And that's really what you need to do, because in coaching, there's so many emotions, right, Claudia? I mean, we talk with people that have come with their react, right? They're needing change, they're seeking change, and their emotions are like right here on their fingertips, right? So we cannot be working and managing ourselves, thinking about, what's the purpose of the conversation and whether it was a good one or not.
Yeah. And maybe let me just maybe rephrase a little bit for people for whom English might not necessarily be their first language.
Sure.
Because we put so much emphasis on this non-judgment, not judging, that I really want to talk a little bit more about the word.
Okay.
It is to pass judgment, kind of to sit there like a judge and to say, this is right or this is wrong. My way of doing is better, and so on. So it is assigning a judgment on it and giving it some validity or not.
Yes.
Rather than just taking it like it is. So this is wrong, this is right, this is better, this is to this, or this is to that. And very often we do not pass judgment just on the situation that we hear about or the context that we hear about. But very often, people, if they're not careful, will pass judgment on the person.
Yes.
Right? The person. And that is really tricky. So, because we just don't know the backstory. We don't know the situation that a given person brings to the table and so on. Let's say it's, and this might fit in here. I'm going to close the judgment parenthesis soon, so bear with me. But imagine there's an English test and the person brings home a B+. And instead of just sitting there and saying, okay, B+, okay, it is what it is. You might say, oh, that is bad. He should have gotten an A+, B+ is a bad mark. But if you then maybe hear that that person is not a native English speaker, that they only have been studying English for 6 months, and nevertheless, they're already at this really advanced level that in this particular test, they can score a B+, all of a sudden, it's a completely different story. And so the trick here is that when you hear B+, you do not jump to the conclusion to say this is bad, this person is stupid. Right? By extension, very often there's these judgments that go onto the person. This person is, rather than this particular test result is. Right? So non-judgment means do not say it's good, it's bad. Do not offer advice because, advice comes from a feeling of superiority, and there shouldn't be this kind of good and bad in the discussion. Okay, so we have put the point on that once and for all. I hope this was helpful for maybe non-native speaking people.
Yes.
And I think it's a good reminder for everybody, actually, because this non-judgment is so fundamental to a lot of things that we are going to discuss today. Yes. So let's get back to intercultural intelligence. Coming to the table with this non-judgment. I think that it's important, and if you hear noises, it's my kitty cats playing. I got a new computer, and that box is just the best toy for them. It is not to assume that other people function or think the way that we do.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And then by extension, not thinking that the way that we do it is the only right way to do it. And every other way is wrong. Again, do not pass that judgment. But rather maybe, this is tip number one, and maybe I need to throw those cats out. Maybe number one is to just sit back and say, oh, there's a difference on how we approach this. And leave it at that. It is different. It is just different.
Yes. So I love how cats, the culture of cats, let's be honest, that's another thing, because there's a culture of dog, culture of cats. I was looking at the movie, speaking of culture, I was looking at this series in Netflix about, the lives of cats, I'm sorry. And it was fascinating. We're going to tell a point there about fascinating, by the way.
Yes.
How we think that things should be. Like, we want to treat cats like they were children, right? We pick them up and we want to bathe them and all of this, and we do trying to understand what really is happening behind the animal, right? To try to respond to its requests and all this kind of things. So imagine if it's so hard for us to understand cats and dogs, the culture of cats and dogs, because it is, even amongst them, they're different in every ways. There's, ones react in one way and the other, and so on and so on, but not all of them. Let's remember that. Not because it's a Siamese cat, it's going to behave the same way as a striped cat, right? Each one comes from a different background. If you've all watched YouTube videos, you've watched how the cats from Japan and Hong Kong and all of these places, their legs are shorter. That's cat culture, right? And then the dogs, how they have their colorful paws and their cheekbones and little hearts. And I mean, there is so much to learn from we don't understand. That's the whole point. But if you don't understand, not because it's different, means that we can pass judgment, that we are somehow thinking that we can do things better or that we know better. One of the hardest things, and I'm going to tell you an Agnet a story. Before I left the US, the first time I traveled internationally, I felt, really nice traveling to Europe and all this kind of stuff. But when I would say that I was from the US, I wasn't very well welcomed, and I didn't understand why. But if I said that I was from another country, oh, totally different aspect. It was like if I said I'm from Mexico, oh, Mexique, and it was very nice and la la and this and that. I even got free things in Germany. And then I started thinking, well, what is it about the American culture that is not so well liked? I started seeing so many things that when you travel, I now understand what they say, that when you're going to travel, you need to prepare. We don't prepare to understand the culture. We don't do our homework to try to understand a little bit of history so that we don't get caught off guard or feel offended or feel like we're not being accepted. That's not the thing. We are just being a part of a different culture, different language. And so what it's best for us to do is to first do our research, and that we are the foreigners and we are there to enjoy their country, right? I think part of doing the background helped me here in Saudi Arabia to understand a little bit. So I'm going to be honest, one of the things that caught me off guard was to see a lot of blue-eyed, blonde people. I was like, how is this possible? Little did I know, the history and everything. Then it was like, oh, that makes sense. So what I'm trying to say is that we have to prepare ourselves to be open-minded. We have to prepare ourselves for new experiences, to understand that we are in a different country and our expectations really should drop, right? Because when you don't expect things, it's even better when you do get what you wanted. And if you don't get it, you don't feel so bad because you didn't have any expectations. What do you think, Claudia?
Yeah, just the fact of being open to not knowing, and being open to be curious and inspired, and going there with good intent as well, and giving everybody and the country in this case the benefit of the doubt. And just consider yourself welcome, and be respectful, and so on. This, however, I think brings up a point that for me in intercultural intelligence is really important. And that is not to confuse different cultures with different nationalities. Okay? Like vastly different nationalities often have different cultures. But rather than thinking of a culture being a characteristic only of a nationality or an ethnicity, I'd like you to start thinking about culture groups. Groups. Because even in the same country, there is people that cannot communicate properly because they belong to vastly different culture groups. And you have across countries and ethnicities people that behave very much the same, for instance. Imagine that you have the culture group of Fortune 500 level CEOs. Yeah, the CEOs from America and the CEOs from Scandinavia and the Japanese ones might very well have a lot in common. Okay, they kind of speak the same language, they're interested in the kind of the same things, maybe they have certain rituals that they like, maybe they all play golf, I don't know, I'm not that kind of a CEO, right? Okay. But it's like, even though they're from vastly different nationalities and cultures, they might very well have quite a lot of similarities, same culture group. Yeah. On the other hand, you might be in the same country, and for instance, the culture group of high-powered CEOs and the culture group of housewives with newborns might be very different, or maybe even going more onto fringe groups or things like that. Nothing in common. Even though they might both be in America or both be in Asia and so on. Culture groups. Actually, in the research and in the theory of cultural intelligence and all that, they say that as much as over 10 aspects filter into the makeup of a culture group. And, it might be well worth talking about that in one of our subsequent episodes. For instance, gender, nationality, age. Oh my goodness. Yeah, you might be in the workforce and you have the new guys that just come out of college, the 20-year-olds, 20-something-year-olds, and you have the old-timers ready to retire. They might be in vastly different culture groups and having trouble crossing this generational gap. Different expectations, assumptions, beliefs, values, ways of communicating, ritualized behavior, and so on and so on. Okay? Same company, same team, cultural divide. And that is exactly where this intercultural or intercultural group intelligence should come in. Oh, this person that I'm working with, that I met, that I fell in love with, behaves different from me in certain aspects. I would like to understand so that I can relate better, so that I can
Yes.
behave appropriately, so that I can build a stronger, more productive relationship. Okay. So what's your take on this whole culture group thing? Care to elaborate a bit more?
Well, for me, it's when you're talking about a workplace, right? In the workplace, where do the biggest differences exist in the workplace, right? It's because you misunderstood somebody, because a word was probably too harsh for you, while for the other person it was the normal, right? It's the word that they learn to use to express themselves. And it's very easy in the workplace to just say, okay, I misunderstood, I'm upset, and you don't let it go. And then it starts building, right? Rather than to try and ask, be curious, just a little bit of curiosity, as to say, well, what do you mean? Or care to elaborate a little bit more, please? Or I'm not sure I understood. Could you please explain it in other words for me? I think if we were to be a little bit more curious about what is trying to be communicated, we would actually be able to understand each other a little bit more. Mind you, I understand that there's days when we feel bad, when we're having a bad day, and maybe something that was really not offensive just simply rubbed you off really bad.
It triggers you that particular day because you're sensitive.
Yes.
You might be tired. You
Yes,
might be, yeah.
exactly. And something that Claudia and I were talking about is, for example, I am American, but I'm also Mexican. Yet I don't get very well with Mexicans, like with my friends. I simply sometimes just keep quiet and I listen to them because I think different. And when I'm in the United States, obviously I feel great and everything else. But I've learned to realize that the people that speak two languages, we have an ample amount of things, of words that we can use for one single thing, right? And so, for example, yesterday we were talking about the word, and now here comes the fascinating, right? The amazing, or the wow, that's interesting, but it all also has to do on how you say them. For example, Claudia, you were saying that fascinating, you had, what was that, your interpretation of fascinating for you?
So the thing
Please.
is like this, that we were again and I was having this discussion actually with a co-coach of mine that I work with when I work with teams, and we were actually discussing words to use that are totally non-judgmental, neutral. So in the use of the word, we do not deliver any kind of emphasis that we might think it is good or that we might think it is bad. They're just neutral. We just acknowledge that something's happening. So before we go to fascinating, maybe the one that struck me actually the most was the word interesting.
Yes.
There's a discussion going and you say, oh, that is interesting. So for me, and I think that is also because I'm from Europe, interesting is an absolutely neutral word. I do not say it is negative, it is positive, it is neutral. And in the Latin, it comes from inter esse. It means to be in the middle of, to be amongst, to be a kind of, part of something. And so for me, when something is interesting, I'm kind of curious, I want to learn more, but it's neutral. It could go either way. It could go and blow up and I decide, not my thing. I mean, internally for me, not necessarily expressed. Or it's like, yeah, this is great. So interesting. For me, super neutral word. Well, my co-coach, she is from America. And she says that when you say, oh, this is interesting, very often people might perceive it as being about something that you downplay, that you downgrade, that you pass slightly negative judgment on. Oh, that is interesting. Okay. Well, I worked for many years in the US and Canada, and I always happily used interesting. Because even though I was a coach back then, I was very already then like kind of in the trying to keep a non-judgmental stance. So, oh, that is interesting. And it never occurred to me back then that there might actually be a difference. So how is interesting as a word for you, Sandra?
I've always used it very casual. Like for me, when I say it's interesting, it's because I really mean it. Like, oh, interesting. Like you and I have talked about things in the past, and I suddenly find myself saying, interesting. Probably in the back of my mind, I'm probably saying, but I'm not saying it. Yeah, but I'm not saying it, like, no, I'm probably in the back saying, really, this lady thinks interesting, like really, really interesting, because one of the biggest things that I try to do in this journey is to say, you have to listen to people. Right? You have to open your mind to other people's perspective. It doesn't mean that because they tell you something or they give their opinion or a comment or whatever, it doesn't mean that you have to do it just because they told you. Just listen to it. And if it works for you, well, sure, you apply it. It's like putting on new shoes, right? If this one doesn't fit, you put on another shoe and you look until you find the right fit. That's how I see things. And so when I say interesting, it's because I really mean it, though in the back of my mind, and I'm not going to say that coaches are free of judgment. No.
Yeah.
But we manage it in a way to say, okay, wait. Be curious. Okay. Right. Ask. Right. And so that is my position when I say the word interesting. I really mean it. Now, if I was to say it in a mean way, I would not say interesting. I would be like, I would not say anything. I would just like be, and I would kind of make the person, I hear you, but I'm not sure I want to proceed with that. That's my way of doing things.
Yeah. And sometimes you don't need to give any kind of qualifier like interesting or fascinating or intriguing or something. You just say thank you. You just say okay. And you leave it at that. There's no need very often to say more, except that we, again, culturally conditioned to at least in as a form of politeness acknowledge that something was said. Okay, and that's again, it's a cultural kind of ritual that just like you say hello when you meet somebody. Yeah,
right.
And so it's just it becomes hair splitting sometimes to find the right way of expressing yourself, because you might not know what emotional charge or cultural bomb some word or some expression or some gesture or some way of thinking might be in somebody else's eyes. You might just not know. And you mentioned earlier in the workplace, there might be situations where you don't catch the drift of something that was communicated. I think it becomes even more difficult about the things that are not communicated.
Mm.
Yeah. For
Yep.
instance, you might do business with, an Asian company.
Mm-hmm.
And, as they head out to dinner, they say, oh, let's go out to dinner.
Mm-hmm.
And you say, no, I have other plans, or I'm tired, I'd rather go home, and stuff like that. And you might not know that that's actually, in certain cultures, a sign of disrespect.
Yes.
Yeah. And it
Yeah.
was never said, but you might just have, done faux pas, meaning you might just have put your foot in it.
Yeah.
Because in your culture, you don't hang out with people after work. In
Mm.
America, I found it's very little that you hang out with your colleagues after work. At least in my
Mm-hmm.
experience, it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
But in some Asian cultures, for instance, it's just an example, there is this thing of a team dinner, of
Mm-hmm.
of continuing the relationships outside the workforce after work.
Mm-hmm.
And
Correct.
so, those are then the really tricky things. And,
Yes.
there's many aspects, many aspects to
You
all
know,
of.
I have to say, I find it a little bit, hard to constantly be telling people you have to keep in mind this and kept. For me, the simplest thing is just to keep an open mind. Just for 1 second, put to the side everything everything how you do, and what is right for you and what is not. Just for a second and listen. I think because imagine we have to keep in mind that in the workplace you have the company culture, then you have the company etiquette, the group etiquette, which, like you were saying, the when people invite you, hey, let's go to lunch, and you're constantly saying no, you find yourself not only not meeting the expectations of being a team player, but you're also kind of putting yourself to the side and making them think that you feel that you are too good for them. So all of these things, that you have to keep in mind all the time. I think the best thing for you is to just put it to the side a little bit. Like when people come from the office and they say, you know what, I'm not going to bring my problems to the house. Something a little bit like that. When you're talking to other cultures, don't, what else do you have in mind?
Well, I mean, in this case, with this inviting to go out to lunch, if you don't get the importance of it, let's say you are not aware of this,
Yes.
hopefully your counterpart is culturally intelligent and will be aware that there's a difference in expectation, that there's a difference in culture, and it will be openly discussed. In my culture, we often hang out for lunch. It would be really nice if once in a while you could come to lunch, even though I understand that, it can't always be like that. And you can start talking about it, right? Rather
Yeah.
than sitting with the frustration.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, you just have to open up and talk about things. And hopefully you'll be in a psychologically safe environment enough to be able to do that.
What you just said, I'm sorry, let me interrupt you for a second. What you just said is something very important. Companies always rely on HR to do that job. But I think that HR, and forgive me, everybody that is in HR, there's not the right amount of understanding from HR of the importance of explaining to your new employees, to the people that are coming on board, to explain to them the culture, the how things are done, and listen to this or listen to that, and blah blah blah. It would be wonderful that there was somebody that was called company culture or something like that, a counterpart. That would be amazing what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
Please.
And again, I think that where company culture lives is at the level of the team.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, very much, because psychological safety very often lives at the level of a team.
Exactly.
So I think that it should be something that a leader of a team brings to the table, this discussion of, these are, for instance, the company values and the company guidelines on culture or whatever. How do we put that into practice in our team, in our little group, in the bubble of our little group? And as you become used to that, then it radiates outwards, and you are able to become a citizen of this company culture. And okay, but we might be going down a rabbit hole a little bit. Yeah, and sorry guys about that, but I really do think that it is such a multifaceted topic, okay, that it will take us a while to go through these different episodes where we just pick out one aspect and delve deeper into it a little bit. So it was actually kind of really tricky to come down with some basic
specific
concepts and lists and stuff like that. Okay. And hopefully also for us, talking about it this way will help putting some clarity and some structure into all this knowledge that we have absorbed over the years. I think that if we were to summarize here, the key components of intercultural intelligence that we touched on are very much self-awareness, know what's going on and how you react to what's happening. Open-mindedness, don't have these preconceived conceptions and just go as the flow and be open for new experiences. Empathy, just put yourself into other people's shoes and accept that their reality might be different from yours. Communication skills, how you talk, how you express yourselves, how you respond to other people's requests and language, and so on. I think that in the whole thing about flexibility and being flexible about how you approach certain things, there's also some problem solving. That can come in. So hone those skills, and I think that it's going to be a really good thing. So, but what about if somebody wants to learn a little bit more about cultural intelligence? What would you tell them?
Well, first of all, you can reach out to one of us. What I would tell them about culture is what I've always suggested to people is there's always something happening in your community, right? There's always places where you can go and hang out. I know that for a lot of people, it's very hard, right? If it's very hard for you, well, then maybe that is not your thing. But if you are working, it doesn't matter where you're working, what country, we've known this. Your company might be, let's say you're Swiss and your company is Swiss. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody is Swiss, right? You have people from other nationalities, or like Claudia was saying, you have groups and you have this person that might be Swiss, but then they're probably are Hindu, or they're probably from France or Japan or all of these countries, and they're coming from a different way of thinking than you, right? And so,
and even if you're Swiss in a Swiss company, we live in a globally connected world at this point.
Yes.
I mean, I'm coaching teams that are all over the globe. And, when we have team meetings, some show up and it's 6 o'clock in the morning, their time, and it's 7 o'clock at night for others joining
Yeah.
this meeting. And they might even never have met face to face. That's the reality of today, distributed all over. So I think that nowadays we have to be globally intelligent. We have to be able to function as a global citizen. And was basic knowledge of what it takes to be able to nurture these relationships across culture boundaries. Yeah.
Another thing that is very important is that you leave it to the side, your fears, and ask. Found myself doing that with a couple of friends. I wanted to understand, for example, here in Saudi Arabia, you have cemeteries, but in the cemeteries, they don't allow females. Only the males go and do the whole burial and all that kind of stuff, but no females. And obviously, my first reaction was, oh, stupid. I'm sorry. That was really my first reaction. Why? Because I am full of what I believe is right? And, or my assumptions. And one day I thought, well, if you're so curious about this, and if you're being so judgmental and you think you know better, why don't you just ask? And that's what I did. I asked. And what they told me was, because it comes a little bit with beliefs, but we have to also respect beliefs. You might not be of that belief, but it's their belief and it's very strong. And it happens that it has to do with, I don't know if you've heard this, Claudia, in some cultures, they believe that dirt from the cemetery, from the graves, it's considered for witchcraft and all this kind of stuff. And so also sicknesses happen to be more available in the cemeteries. So they believe that women are very fragile, and therefore it's not a good idea for women to go into the cemeteries and get sick. Two, it's usually their belief that women are the witches. So if a woman was to go to the cemetery, well, she's going to pick up dirt from the graves or from the cemetery and then use it for witchcraft. So there's a lot of beliefs behind this, right? And you have to respect it. Okay, now that you heard it, I understand it. I don't have to accept it, but then who am I to say it is or it is not right? Right? I got my answer, and now I understand why the cemeteries say no females. That's all I wanted to know. So that's part of what we're inviting Claudia and I for people to see, right? That you might not agree with it, but it's just about listening and respecting the opinions, the beliefs, the values that happen behind a person's reasoning.
Yeah. Don't expect anything. Don't make assumptions that things are going to be the way that you're used to, right? And then of course do not pass judgment, meaning that my way is the way that I am used to is the right way, and your way is right.
Correct.
So it's just they're just different. They're just different. So yes, I think that what you mentioned, go out into your community, become immersed in different cultures, start discussions with people, learn about different places, travel, and so on. On the other hand, maybe it bears, and we will talk about it in future episodes, there are certain dimensions of characteristics of culture, and you can learn about those. Okay, like for instance, one that people might be interested in, some culture groups are more individualistic and some are more collectivist. Some culture groups are high power distance versus low power distance. Yeah, some cultures are ascription-based versus merit-based, and so on. So these things are usually polar opposites, okay, characteristics. And so what researchers do, and it actually helps you sometimes look at a cultural situation through these lenses, through like, what's happening here? Is this a power distance thing? What's happening here? So it allows us to look at things maybe with a different eye and different sensitivities. So usually how you can think about it is that there's a sliding scale from 100% individualistic to 100% collectivist. And maybe this person or this collective or this situation or this culture group as a whole falls somewhere on that sliding scale, because even the culture group is never 100% this or 100% that, but they might have a preference for it, or they might be predominantly this way or that way. And so there is, a good dozen or so of those characteristics, if you want to call them that, of culture. And so we are actually going to talk about those in different episodes in the future.
Correct.
It really helps, I mean, one way that I like to do and observe things is by watching international movies. Okay.
Yes.
And Netflix actually has been great. And we're not getting paid by Netflix people, it would be nice. It's like Netflix has a lot of international movies from different cultures and things like that. Okay, so I am the first one to know that, it's movies. It's not necessarily reality and stuff like that. I mean, definitely not. I mean, there's all these creative liberties people take. But on the other hand, if you watch a lot of movies from one place, like one of my favorites is South Korea, you will see certain patterns that repeat over and over. And so after a certain while, you kind of can assume that maybe it's a predominant trait because it comes over and over and over. It's always repeated. For instance, the respect that is given to older people. And older family members, older people with higher status, maybe in a company and so on. It's a very high power distance country. So, you learn about these things and you feel expression, you see how this is expressed in everyday situations. Because if you grew up really in a low power distance situation where you can go to your boss and say, hey, and you use non-polite ways of addressing them in languages that have polite forms or non-polite forms, and it's very casual and laid back, and he can just be like your best buddy and things like that. That is, if you're used to that, and all of a sudden you go to like a high power distance country, or you deal with high power distance and inspired customers, it would be such a disconnect. And so it helps when you first of all know about the concept of high power distance in this example, and you're able to recognize it. Yep. You might not know that these people come from a culture that has that, but you will recognize it when you see it. Yes. Because again, I think it bears repeating that a culturally intelligent person does not need to be an expert on every culture.
Correct.
We're just maybe better at sniffing out differences and characteristics of culture.
Yes, correct. I think I want to give something fun for if I was to tell people, what would be a best example of how to see cultures in a fun way? Star Trek. Star Trek was one of the first shows to be multicultural, the first one to accept women in higher positions, to treat women with equal, at a certain point, the first ones, they were from the 50s. So we have to kind of give them a little bit of a chance, right? They did their best. But as they, as it progressed and all these new shows, you can see that women are treated equally. But the point here is, if I was to explain to people, the high power distance, the collective, the individualistic, and everything else, I would probably use Star Trek. Maybe that would be a fun thing for me to do.
Because
Next time we explain.
every show, they kind of went to a different planet and met different types of people and so on. And they were always respectful of what they found. And they tried to fit in and communicate in a way that was appropriate and adapt to new situations. A very positive show for sure. Yeah.
Right. And one of the most important things that I liked about it, that even though they broke the rules occasionally, was that they had the directive, right? The Federation had something that they called the directive something. What I'm trying to say is that where they would say that it was prohibited to intervene in the culture that you were investigating or researching, right? Especially if the culture was not aware of technology, right? So it fits for, we want to change everything, and we're like, oh no, women's rights, and yes, women's rights, but each country has to develop at their time. I can tell you, for example, if you allow me to say, it's Saudi Arabia. One of the things that I found fascinating, at first it wasn't fascinating, I could say it was very frustrating, but now what I find fascinating is how I've been a part of their development, how they've opened their minds into, saying, what, women wearing abayas is not necessary anymore, you can wear your regular clothes, or you can now put on makeup, and we're going to eliminate the mutawas, which was the religious police, the ones that were telling you whether you should wear this color or not wear like that, your hair, or pick up your hair or cover your hair. I mean, it was a mess. I've liked that about being here in Saudi Arabia for the past 8 years. And it's fascinating, but have I gone and said, well, why are you letting this man treat you? No, it's not my place. It's not for me to say, unless somebody asks my opinion. Yeah, I'm going to say what I think to a certain extent, because some people have never left Saudi Arabia. And giving them a different perspective can be a shock. So that's another thing that you have to keep in mind. Who are you talking with? What are you saying? Where are you coming from that makes you, smarter to say, do I want to go this route? Should I share this? No, maybe not. There's all these things that I've learned being here in Saudi Arabia. And I think that's what has helped me in this journey with intercultural ICQ learning, where I understood what it was to feel frustrated, but then understand and then embrace it, and then find yourself like, this is progress, this is good, and each step. Of course, it's probably going to be 100 years before they can actually be somewhere close to the United States of the 1960s, okay? But they're getting there. And they're embracing their culture at the same time. So they're like, we're giving these freedoms, but we're doing it around our Muslim beliefs, which is what I also like. So they're not willing to compromise that, right? So let's keep that in mind also, that they're going to do technology, they're going to do books, they're going to do events, but it all has to be within their Islamic beliefs. And that is very, yes, there's a time for everything.
And a context for everything. And
correct.
We have to be respectful that, different culture groups are inspired also by other things and all different values and so on. What's important to us might not at all be important to them, right? I mean, who would it's not our place to judge. It's not our place to judge, just the same way that we do not want to be judged by others. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, there's so much that goes into being an interculturally intelligent person, and maybe we have to actually start wrapping it up. But
yes,
again, you're not necessarily an expert on every culture. Rather, you can observe an environment, a situation, a behavior from others, and make an informed have some informed awareness about what might be influencing this. And we're talking again about these characteristics and hold back your assumptions of what's happening or what should be happening, and your assumptions and your expectations. Then again, don't think, again, this judgment kind of thing, withhold judgment that things should be the way that you think they should be, or that you know what's right or what's wrong. The stuff that you know is right or wrong is right for you, but it's not right or wrong for everybody. Also, I think that it requires us to become comfortable with the unfamiliar or the ambiguous. Right? We will not be able to figure all this out because we lack this historical background. We lack information, oftentimes, as simple as that. So be okay with not knowing, because all these influences are so complex and so interconnected that it's not easy to put your finger on it in every case.
Correct.
So again, do not, do not label things, but allow for some things, because that's actually another thing. And maybe just the very last thing that bears mentioning is, just because a person is from there, they are like that. Just because a Brazilian person is from Brazil does not mean he behaves like what you perceive the typical Brazilian is. Just because a person is from Germany and born there and grew up there and that nationality doesn't mean that they behave like every German. People, I'm Luxembourgish and I do not behave like every other Luxembourgish person. Right? I cannot find two that behave the same. We all are different. So let's not label people, but rather be just excited and interested and curious about all the differences, because otherwise, wouldn't it be a pretty dull world if we all were exactly the same?
Exactly. Well, and I think with that, it's a really good ending. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, everybody, for watching. If you're listening, please don't forget to give us a like, share, go into our LinkedIn page, our LinkedIn page. We don't have Facebook, but we do have YouTube channel. So please give us a like, share with people, and hopefully if you feel like you want to share or give us your opinion, we would like to have you on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this first episode actually was really tricky because
Yeah.
it's like there's so much that goes into this.
Yes.
That it's not that straightforward to just talk about it off the cuff like this. So, but
exactly.
we will try to make make it clearer as we go along. Please join us again every third week, every third Wednesday of the month at our usual time. So we see you then. Thank you so much. And Sandra, it was a pleasure.
Likewise, Claudia. Thank you. Bye.